They storm onto our screens, faces smeared with blood, axes swinging in the firelight. Hollywood paints them as monsters, barbarians who lived for chaos, for conquest, for the thrill of the kill. The word Viking echoes like a warning, a specter drifting in from the frozen north. But is that all there is? Is this savage image the whole story, or just a mask crafted by centuries of fear, fascination, and misunderstanding? Tonight, we peel it back, because the real Vikings, what they lived for, what they built, what they truly feared, might surprise you. Where did the Viking stereotype come from? For centuries, the story of the Vikings was not told by the Vikings themselves, but by the ones who feared them most. Medieval monks and chroniclers, sheltering behind monastery walls, wrote tales of terror. Ships emerging from morning mist, villages set aflame, prayers lost beneath the roar of northern raiders. To these witnesses, the Vikings were nothing but shadows and fire, a threat from the edge of the known world. Their words, heavy with fear and outrage, became the foundation of legend. And over generations, that legend grew. Painters and poets, then novelists, then Hollywood filmmakers, all took up the story, sharpening the edges, raising the stakes, turning real men and women into larger-than-life villains. But why did this version endure so powerfully, especially here, in the modern West? Perhaps because every culture needs its monsters. Perhaps because we find it easier to imagine the past as brutal, alien, something conquered and left behind. Yet the truth, as always, is more complicated and far more human. The truth about Viking society. Complex, diverse, unexpected. But step beyond the legends, and the world of the Vikings unfolds into something far richer and far more ordinary than most would expect. Most Vikings were not marauders, but makers. Their hands were calloused from the earth, not from the sword. Fields of barley and rye, grazing sheep and cattle, bustling open-air markets. These formed the real heart of the Viking Age. Imagine the quiet before dawn in a northern village. Smoke curling from sod-roofed homes, the laughter of children chasing stray chickens, the measured rhythm of blacksmiths at their forges, and women weaving bright tapestries that would travel the world as prized trade goods. These were lives rooted in family, faith, and fierce loyalty to the land, a tapestry of daily routines more familiar than foreign to us now. The Vikings were traders, not just raiders, and their ships carried more than warriors. They carried furs, amber, honey, finely wrought jewelry, and even stories from distant shores. Their reach stretched from the icy fjords of Norway to the markets of Constantinople, from the windswept cliffs of Ireland to the silk roads that wound deep into Asia. Within their settlements, there were laws and assemblies, known as things, where free men and women could speak, argue, and demand justice. Archaeology reveals not only weapons, but intricate tools, toys, and musical instruments, proof of a people who created, dreamed, and loved, even as they struggled against the wildness of their world. Yes, there were warriors, fierce and famed, some remembered in saga and song. But for every sword raised in battle, there were 100 hands tending fields, shaping silver, teaching children, and building a society whose echoes still ripple across Northern Europe today. The true story of the Vikings is not just one of blood and fire. It is a story of survival, adaptation, and extraordinary resilience. A story, perhaps, that is closer to our own than we might ever have guessed. Ready for the next segment, where we explore why the myth of the bloodthirsty Viking still dominates, and how it was shaped by history, fear, and pop culture? Just say the word. Why the savage Viking myth endures. Yet, if so much of Viking life was rooted in craft and community, why has the legend of the bloodthirsty raider proven so stubborn, so difficult to dispel even today? Part of the answer lies in the nature of history itself. For centuries, history was not an impartial record. It was a weapon, wielded by the frightened and the conquered. The earliest written accounts of the Vikings came from those who suffered most at their hands. Monks who watched their sanctuaries burn, peasants who saw ships appear like ghosts on the horizon. To them, the Viking was not a neighbor or a merchant or a parent. He was the face of terror, the bringer of night. It is a pattern as old as humanity. When chaos descends, we name it, we vilify it, we pass the story on. These stories, retold and exaggerated through generations, became foundations for the myths we still recognize. The Viking as a barbarian, the eternal outsider, the one who must always be held at bay. And then came the artists, the chroniclers, the painters, the novelists, and at last, the filmmakers, each one amplifying the image, feeding our appetite for spectacle. Hollywood, in particular, seized the Viking legend and transformed it into something larger than life. Horned helmets, endless battles, seas awash with blood. It was entertainment, and it was effective. But it was rarely true. Yet, perhaps we keep these stories alive because they offer us something more. A glimpse into the fears and fantasies that still live beneath our own civilization's polished surface. After all, every society needs its monsters, and sometimes we'd rather believe in legends than look for the human face beneath the mask. Archaeology and the real face of the Vikings. But the earth remembers what stories sometimes forget. Beneath the windswept fields of Scandinavia and the coasts of distant lands, archaeologists have uncovered the silent testimony of everyday life, evidence that challenges the legend, piece by patient piece. Graves once thought to belong only to mighty warriors have yielded delicate jewelry, hand-carved toys, seeds from faraway lands, and even musical instruments. Homes unearthed in former Viking settlements reveal hearths crowded with tools, pottery, loom weights, and gaming pieces, reminders that laughter and play echo just as often as the sounds of steel. In recent years, the study of ancient DNA has forced us to rethink who could be a Viking. The image of the towering, blonde-haired raider is a myth itself. In truth, Viking society was diverse, drawing people from across northern Europe and beyond. Women, too, played vital roles, sometimes even as explorers, traders, and yes, on rare occasion, warriors, buried with honor. We now know that Vikings left behind more than terror. They left towns, laws, roads, art, and words that still thread through the languages of Northern Europe. Their maps, scratched into memory and stone, helped open up a world, and in the process, tied distant peoples together long before modern nations were even imagined. Slowly, the mask cracks. The truth seeps through, not of a nation of monsters, but of a people both fierce and fragile, whose legacy was built not just on conquest, but on connection, creativity, and survival. Let me know if you'd like to continue into the comparison between Hollywood's Vikings and real Viking history, or if you want to move towards a strong closing and call to action. I'll keep the same style throughout. Hollywood versus history, the Viking we want, and the Viking who was. Still, for every discovery that brings us closer to the truth, there is another battle waged on our screens. Movies and television, video games and comic books, each one polishes the old myth, sometimes more dazzling than ever. We see the Viking as a giant in a horned helmet, roaring through fire and ruin, driven only by rage. He is a symbol of pure freedom, wildness, unbound by law or mercy. It's an image designed to thrill us, to let us imagine what it might feel like to break the rules of our own world, if only for a moment. But what is lost in that fantasy? When we flatten an entire people into a single bloody silhouette, we lose the complexity and the humanity that makes their story worth telling at all. The truth is, the Vikings built things as often as they burned them. They were artists as well as adventurers, lawmakers as well as raiders, fathers, daughters, dreamers, and survivors. Their sagas are full of poetry and heartbreak, ambition and longing, not just battle cries and vengeance. And so, the next time a Viking storms across your screen, ask yourself, what is real and what is reflection? Whose story are we telling? The one we inherited from fear and fantasy, or the one waiting quietly in the earth, still alive beneath our feet? Let me know if you'd like the closing section, a powerful, thought-provoking conclusion, and a call to action to draw in comments and engagement, plus a hook for the next episode. I'll keep the same motif. Conclusion: the human face behind the legend. So, what do we see when we look beyond the legend, beyond the flicker of torches and the crash of steel? We see a people shaped by hardship and hope, by storms and sunlight, by the yearning to belong and to become something greater. The Vikings were not just ghosts haunting the edges of Europe's memory. They were mothers and sons, builders and storytellers, strangers who became neighbors, travelers who crossed horizons to find new homes. Their legacy is not measured in blood, but in the bonds they forged, the words, the ideas, the quiet strength that still echo in the north wind. Perhaps the most dangerous myth is not that the Vikings were savages, but that any people can be summed up by a single story. History is never that simple. It is 1,000 voices, 1,000 hands, shaping the world together. One day, one dream, one heartbeat at a time. So, the next time you hear the word Viking, ask yourself, are you seeing a mask or a mirror? And what might we find if we finally dare to look past the legend and into the truth? If you've ever questioned the stories you've been told, or wondered what other myths are hiding just beneath the surface, let me know in the comments below. And don't miss our next episode, where we uncover the real story behind the Viking horned helmet, a symbol that never was, and a lesson in how history gets made. Thank you for joining me on this journey. The past is closer than we think.